Hey everyone, thanks for logging in. We might get right into it. Thanks to everyone for coming. So yeah, really want to wish everyone a warm welcome to, and this is a special episode of Anaesthesia Coffee Break as well as Adrenaline Memories. And it's really about the Mount Everest challenge, being a mum, getting through this first part exam, and I just being a person who's not a mum at all, I cannot imagine how hard it is, because I know how hard people have to work just at being a mum in itself without actually sitting this exam. So what I thought we'd do is, this is a really open discussion. Please post any questions in the chat. We're going to be talking to one of our trainees who's passed the exam and is a mum as well. And I thought what we'd go through is a bit of background, kind of try to find out what the main issues are, and then really get onto asking, the audience and particular trainee Sarah about her experience, her background, anesthesia training, her experience of being a mum and doing the first part exam, the challenges, the resources and supports that are out there, and what you'd potentially like as solutions and kind of supports that would be really great into the future. So I might just put it over to Stan, because Stan, it was so good that this came to you, that this was a really important thing to talk about, especially because you're right at the forefront of trying to give as much education out there as possible. So yeah, Stan, over to you.
Thanks, La. And look, this topic is especially dear to my heart. It makes me very emotional, actually. Myself being a father of 3 kids and understanding the sacrifices that my wife has had to make to support my career. And I can only imagine how difficult it is for you mums out there, having to be in that role to support your families and to also be able to advance your careers as well. And, for that, I think you guys are absolutely amazing. And, being a mother, as I said in the post, just requires unrequited love, dedication, and sacrifice. And, those are all those things that, I talk about for the primary exam. That's what it takes to pass. But the thing is, for us, it's easy enough without families, without children to say that. And, I sat the exam without any kids. And I think that, what I'm beginning to understand is that it's very hard. And rightly so, you should always have your kids as your number one priority. And it's very hard to put the exam as your number one priority and be able to gain the time to actually get, the experience to pass this exam. So I am absolutely in awe of, what you've achieved, and your resilience absolutely amazes me. And, many of you have actually reached out to me, a number of you. And I can tell you, I'm absolutely heartbroken, absolutely emotional, and I share your pain. And I really want to do everything I can to help you pass. I'm going to be honest, I don't have all the answers. And I think that this is something that, I think with La, we want to explore, and we hopefully want to come up with, ideas in terms of how we can keep on getting better and keep on providing the support that I think hopefully will help you achieve success in this exam. And I really like to thank Sarah Ritchie from New South Wales for coming here today to talk to us and share with us her experiences of being a mum and also being able to get through the primary exam as well.
Excellent. And so, Sarah, before we get on to you, I thought I'd just outline a few things that I think, maybe a few assumptions and a few facts and things that Stan and I both said about this exam. For example, I think one of the first things is there's probably more mums sitting in our experience. Again, this is just our small experience of being in a public hospital and seeing who's going through the exams. But when we were sitting, no one was a mum. Everyone was essentially, without children, sitting their primary exam, and maybe for the second part exam, they might have gone to that stage in life. So I think it's far more of an issue now that people do have children when they're sitting exams, and maybe there's more grad. I think when I was sitting, everyone pretty much done undergrad med, whereas nowadays most people do postgrad med. So there's more mums sitting. I think the fact is that the mums probably have a lower pass rate, and there's a few groups out there that in a sense are disadvantaged, I guess, or do have those challenges. So having those lower pass rates mean that there definitely is something that needs to be addressed, and an aspect of equality here that is really important to address. But also the fact that, again, just from my experience, and this could be completely wrong, but I feel like in my experience, mums probably take on the burden of child raising and feel far more in terms of making children their priority. Whereas again, just in my experience, I know that dads, I find it a lot easier to put work as a priority. So yeah, n equals whatever. If that's a real thing, I think that's really important to acknowledge as well. And finally, I think I have, when I speak about this exam to all my trainees, I constantly say that this exam must be a priority and nothing else matters. And that's how I felt during the exam. I gave up everything to get through this exam because I just realized how hard it was and how much I'd need to sacrifice for this. But that's just not possible. And I feel like I probably need to, I think we all need to try to find a way around that. The fact that the exam is incredibly difficult and can be difficult, but then there's a way through it. And there's a way we can find a solution in these circumstances where, you have these challenges like being a mum. And when I synthesize it, and hopefully this can be part of the discussion of solutions, but I feel like it really is a problem of time, and you've only got so many hours in the day, and a problem of flexibility of time, because suddenly your kids or your family needs you. You've got to be able to somehow manage that as well as prioritizing your study. So time and flexibility, I feel like, are these really big issues that if someone we could find answers for, could make things a lot better. So hey, Stan, did you want to add anything else to that before we get on to Sarah's experience?
No, I think you've covered it really well and explained it really eloquently, La. And I think that we really need to hear from Sarah from a first-hand experience in terms of, what she went through and how she found it.
Beautiful, Sarah. So yeah, welcome. Thanks so much for coming and sharing with us and sharing your story. If you could give us a bit of your background first, and when you got onto training, and just what your experience was, and then we'll get into more detail, hopefully, about your experience of actually sitting the exam. What are the challenges? Any anecdotes you had about how you managed your time and some of the solutions, resources, supports you came through. Hopefully, we'll be able to get through a bit of that, and maybe some of aspects of how people could learn from experience, change. And maybe get even support from ANSCA and other bodies. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me today. I feel like I'm very normal and undeserving of talking to you all about my experience, which to me is just my life. But I studied postgrad med, as I'm sure most of you guys have. And I have been was an intern resident SRMO, and that's when I started having my kids. So I had a baby as an intern, then I had a baby as an SRMO. So then I did my SRMO year in crit care down in sunny Wagga Wagga, and did my first year of training down in Wagga, which is where I sat the primary for the first time last year in August. And then this year I moved to Sydney. Got a job out at Nepean, which, if any of you know Sydney, it's as far west as you can get before you hit the Blue Mountains. So it has its own challenges. And then I sat the exam in March and May, where I was successful. And it's been a week or 10 days, and life's been very, very good. So I highly recommend life from the other side. It's so much better. So yeah, that's my training story. I'm 34. So, I feel old, but because I have colleagues of mine who are my age and consultants, and I'm a second year trainee, but that's okay. It's not a race.
And I think that's really insightful, Sarah, the fact that you said that you actually set the primary last year in August and didn't get through. And I almost think that it's almost a very common theme among mums that on their first attempt, that perhaps they're not quite ready yet, and they need that bit of extra time to actually get through. Like, what was the difference, do you think, between the August and this sitting here?
Yeah, so I definitely think that as a mum, or as someone that can't give their whole life, the 1,000 hours takes longer to get. So I think the extra 6, when I sat last year, my mentality going in, because I was really unsure whether I should sit it or not, was on a good day, I'll pass. And I missed out on passing by 2 multiple choice questions. So I was close, but not close enough. And it's not going to be a good day. I think you have to acknowledge that it's a really stressful day. Last year, it was COVID lockdown. I wasn't sure where I was even sitting until the day before the exam, because we couldn't go to Sydney or Canberra. Then New South Wales locked down, so I ended up sitting it in Wagga. like there was so many pieces of the puzzle that made it a really bad day. And I think in hindsight, my main advice to people who have kids is it takes longer than you think. And that extra 6 months gave me the confidence that when I started in March this year, that I just went in feeling like I knew my stuff, and that there was nothing that they could ask me that I wasn't going to be able to write something about. Even Teg and Rotem, which I'd never seen and really didn't know a whole lot about, I still, I wrote something reasonable down. And I think having that confidence that you know enough to get by is really powerful, and it changes how you approach the exam on the day, and it just changes your mindset, so that instead of, I went into the second time thinking that I'm going to pass on a bad day, and that really helped.
No, fantastic. And altogether, you would say that you studied for 18 months?
Yeah, 18 months.
I mean, that's really, really insightful, I think. And I'm starting to wonder whether, like the advice we should be giving for mums is that perhaps, with that balance, you do need to have that longer stretch. And I think La and I were having a chat about this before, about how the progression of time has changed, since, I guess, when we were starting off, people were saying 9 months, and then now we're sort of saying 12 months, and perhaps now we should even be pushing it longer. How did you manage work and study at the same time? Were you still still work full time?
Yeah, so I've always worked full time. I want to get my training done while my kids are little, because I figure they don't need me as much now. Anyone can cuddle. This is just my personal opinion. Lots of other people don't share this, but I figure anyone can cuddle them. Anyone can read them a story, but I want to be there when they're teenagers and older, so I can help them and guide them through life. So that's just my philosophy. So I'd rather work really hard now so I can get all my training done by the time my eldest will be 8. And then I can be there to help him out in life. So I've always worked full time, and I don't intend to start working part time until I'm finished. But I think for me, I chose to stay in Wagga to do an independent training year, which New South Wales is a weird place for training, which is a whole other issue. But I chose to stay in Wagga and do a 1 year with a 1 year contract, because for me, even though I had no family there, I had no commute time. So I wasn't wasting time getting to work. So for me, that was an extra 2 hours a day that I could study. I found that was really invaluable. And this year I've gone to having an hour and a half commute each way to work. So that's, if people who are working in big cities with big commutes, like that just takes out so much of your working day. So I know that not everyone can move to the country and do a year of their training, but it worked for us really well. Because otherwise, it just leaves such a burden on your days off. You just don't have the time.
That's interesting, like to say that, because the commute time is definitely the time sink. But then the small town effect is some small towns will have lots of examiner type consultants ready to give you first part teaching, and others won't. Was Wagga particularly good with first part teaching?
Yes, I think it was. I think when you're in a place and it's the only place you've worked, you're like, oh, I don't know how to compare, but it actually was quite good, especially when it came to Vivas, because I was at a new hospital and had been in such exam mode. I didn't really know many consultants at my new hospital to ask, and I didn't know really anyone because I'd only been there for a few months. So all of my Wagga bosses gave me Vivas, and were more than happy to, even though they said, oh, we're not very good at this, but I mean, everyone can read. And they just read them and they were fantastic. And I really appreciate that they're still supporting me and helping me when they really don't have to.
It really just sounds like whatever the challenges are, you've got this strong community of people who want to help out, mentors and all the rest of it. We see it time and time again that seems to take out a whole bunch of the burden and the difficulties, just because you've got people to support you. So yeah,
I would say definitely. And I think this is not an individual sport, it's a team sport. And as a mum, or like, I have the most amazing husband, And I really would not have been able to do this without him. He allowed me to, as single-mindedly as I could, focus on this exam. And it doesn't need to be your husband. It can be your mum or a friend, or if you have no family and you're a single mum, someone you pay, but you cannot do this by yourself. You have too many balls to juggle. Like basically in the lead up to the exam, this first time, my husband took long service leave. My mum took long service leave and then couldn't come to help because she got locked down in Sydney. So I just had people who were giving up their time for me. And that's really amazing that someone would do that, even though I know that they love me. They don't have to do that. That's a massive ask for them. Like we could have gone on a holiday, but Duncan just decided to stay home in Wagga and mind our children for 6 weeks. So I could not have done it without them. And the second time around, we actually moved to Sydney and we lived with my parents. So I didn't cook a meal or do a load of washing, I think, in 2 months. I would just work and study. And the exam was my main priority because I had already done it once. I did not want to do it again. And I was allowed to, selfish has negative connotations, but I was really selfish. I just focused on the exam. I lived and breathed pharmacology, physiology, and equipment. And I think in the end, that's what you have to do. You have to, as mums and dads, we inherently try and put our kids first. And, we read them stories and we put them first, but you can't do that if you want to pass, which is sad. But I just personally, I can't see a way of being a really good mum, a really good doctor, and passing the primary. Something has to give. And I think that the more we acknowledge that, the easier it becomes for ourselves to realize that it's okay. We're not going to be perfect, and we just have to do what we have to do to get through.
And just from what you said, first of all, how do you have that conversation of, look, I've just got to be selfish for this many months or however much time I need to put this as a priority? How did you have that conversation? And also, what was your amount of children's time? Like, I imagine you had to have some children's time. How did you balance the amount? Like, was it very regimented or? Yeah.
My kids are really good. Like they're 5 and 3, and the 3-year-old basically had mum studying for his whole life that he can remember. And they just get used to it. Like they are really good. For me, this probably sounds a bit weird, but we used to have showers together. So I would come home from work, the kids would be fed. We'd all get, like me and the 2 boys would get in the shower, or I'd supervise them while they had a bath. And that was family time. That was my time. And then my husband would put them to bed and I would study. So that was something that worked really well. Or I would read them a book, but it was quite small chunks. On the weekends or when I had a day off, I would study in the morning for 4 hours, like Patsy Tremaine recommends. So that was like unbreakable time from 8 till 12 and then I would like watch a movie with them or play blocks or whatever for a couple of hours in the middle of the day. And then I would study again in the afternoon, and they just got used to it. And sometimes they would try and break down my door and be like quite annoying, but most of the time my husband would take them out of the house. And that's how we managed.
Just to give a bit of context to that, Patsy Tremaine does a lot of performance coaching, and she's a kind of elite sportsman turns like performance psychologist, but she does advocate for the best hours in the morning, 50 minutes, 50 minutes on, 10 minutes break, times 4 for 4 hours in the morning. And then afternoons are like just relax and see your mates, and then evenings are for testing because you're going to be tired and you want to test while you're tired. So yeah, really kind of like that framework. That seems like a pretty good framework to have. And so you were saying then you had this, like, in terms of amount of time with your kids, would you say it was an hour a day just to get to the nitty-gritty of it?
It varied. So it might have been half an hour during the week, and then on the weekends I would try and spend a little bit longer, and it might be 1 to 2 hours of quality-ish time, as quality as you can. But yeah, it wasn't a huge amount. But now I've finished and I've spent the last 10 days with them because I've had annual leave, and they don't care that I have ignored them for the last 18 months. We've gone to the beach, they give me hugs. We went out and had lunch today, and one of them was sitting on my lap eating his chicken nuggets, and I was like, oh, what are you doing there? And like, they just don't care. They are happy to have me back, and it hasn't at this point impacted on our relationship at all.
How did you have those conversations about what you need?
I'm quite direct, as I think probably most of us anaesthetic trainees are, because we have to be, especially the girls. And I just said to my husband that this isn't forever, and this is what I have to do. And he is very much, I think, an advocate, and we need to take our male allies where we can, because otherwise we're not going to get very far without our advocates and allies. And he was just said, oh yeah, that's fine, if it makes you happy, off you go. So I'm very lucky.
I remember having a similar conversation in the relationship I was in during my exams, and I just thought it was going to end really badly. I said, look, I've got this thing, we just started seeing each other, I've got this big exam, I might not be able to see more than once a week or whatever I said. And they were just completely fine with that. Like, I was just surprised that all I needed to do was ask and outline the situation, and it actually turned out a lot better than I thought it would be. So yeah, having those difficult conversations and asking for uni isn't easy, but yeah, it's good that the realization that you have, which was to be direct and ask that.
And I think also having it early. So when I came back from even before specialist trainings, I was an intern, and I'd come back from mat leave, and I was hating being back at work, and it was all hard. And I said to Duncan that I was just going to go and do GP because it seemed like a better option than the horrible ED rotation I was on. And he said, okay. And then after a few weeks, when I'd got back into the swing of it, I thought, no, if I'd do GP because that's what you want to do, don't do GP because you think it's better than what you're doing. And I said to him, actually, I don't want to do GP. I think I want to, at that stage, it was ICU. I was like, I think I want to do ICU. And he said, okay. And I said, that's going to be hard. And he's like, that's fine. We'll deal with it later. So I think and then ICU turned into anesthetics. But I think having those conversations and being really open about the plan, and I think also remembering that training and being a trainee and being a consultant is different. And I look at the consultants that I've worked with, and I talk to them about their life, and I think it helps you to see the other side from the fog that you're in at the moment.
Yeah.
And so, Sarah, you've talked about open communication, you've talked about sacrifice, and it's really a collective commitment from all those around you. And I was wondering if you could, look back and go back about sort of, 6 months ago. Do you think you needed to sit the August exam and not pass to be in this position? Or do you think that perhaps there was another way to sort of approach it? What are your thoughts about the whole process?
That's a really interesting question, and one that I've thought about quite a lot. Like, would I have had the same mindset going in this time if I didn't sit in August? And I haven't really come to a good answer. For me, working somewhere where I had great consultants, but I'd never had a question marked by or spoken to an examiner. So I found the feedback that I got for the short answer questions, even though it was just a mark, was really useful. And I found that getting my marks for those short answer questions gave me the concrete knowledge that my answers didn't have to be perfect. My answers didn't have to be like ketamine nightmares, which is great, but it's unrealistic for 10 minutes. So that I felt was really, really useful. And I'm not sure if I would have had that same confidence going in if I didn't know that. So yeah, was it worth a $5,000 practice run? I don't know. And it might backfire. And I definitely had some demons, I think, going in. When I sat the second time, I was like, geez, I do not want to have to do this again. But it was a valuable experience.
Did you change your your commitment or your approach? So going in from August, it sounds like, you had everything sort of set into place, but then because you didn't get through, did you tweak anything from August to March? Because I know that a lot of mums here are going through the same thing that you went through a couple of months ago, where now they haven't gone through this exam. Now they're trying to think about how to approach the next one in August.
Yes, I definitely did. And I'm happy also, if anyone has any questions, just ask them. I gave myself a good break, and then, which I think was valuable in not getting a Viva, because I took a good 2 months off. I mean, I cried for about a week. And then I took a good 2 months off and refreshed and completely recharged my batteries. So I didn't keep going. And then I really probably took another week and just looked at where I'd gone wrong. I talked to a few of my bosses who'd sat twice. And one of them gave me some really good advice, which was, he said to me, "Do you use highlighters and colored pens?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." And he goes, "Throw them all away." And I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, "It's passive learning. Chuck them away. You just need to do active learning." And he said, I think he'd said it twice or 3 times. And he said it was the first thing in his life he hadn't passed and excelled at. And he said, "You have to look at what you've done and you have to change." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, okay." So I looked at what I'd done the first time, and I made an active decision to change what I did. So I did much more testing. I thought I'd done enough multiple choice questions, but I hadn't. So I did not multiple choice questions till I couldn't look at them anymore. I really evaluated my study, and I did much more testing the second time around. I also we had a group session with a sports psychologist through my work, which I found completely invaluable in changing my attitude. And I highly recommend seeking professional help. And he said a few things that really resonated with me. And one of them was that when you don't pass your exam or you don't achieve your goal, there's a lot of fear behind that. And I know that when the first time around, I was really worried about letting everyone down. I had so much pressure, and I was worried about letting my partner, my mum, the boys, myself. I was just so frightened of letting everyone down. And I sat my little boy down, who was 4, and I said, "Look, mate, I'm so sorry, but mummy didn't pass her exam, so she's going to have to keep studying." And he just looked at me and said, "But can we go make a cake?" And I was like, "Sure, we can go make a cake. My whole world's ended, but yeah, let's go make a cake." So we went and made the cake, and I was like, he actually doesn't care. Like, he couldn't care less. And that was really a real revelation for me, that like, they don't care. They really couldn't care at all. So the pressure after that, I felt just a lot less pressure on myself, because I went from feeling like the whole world expected me to pass to being like, just do it. What have you got to? And he had this, had worked with a lot of Olympic athletes, and he had this, said you have to go in to the exam with like an empty mind, and a mind that, and he said, when you go in with an empty mind, you're dangerous, because you then can let all the information come out. And so I worked on, I hope he doesn't hear this, so I've probably got it all wrong, but I worked on just trying to leave all that stuff behind and not worry about what everyone else was thinking, and just really run my own race. And I felt the second time so much less pressure going into the exam.
I've never thought of that. And like, no one actually cares about this exam except you. Like, it matters to you, but as long as you're a mum at the end to your kids, then whether you pass or fail, they probably don't matter at all. They don't care at all about your success or failure.
It was pretty heartbreaking, actually. But I mean, it was very humbling.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So so essentially they said to go in with an absolute, empty mind, which means you don't worry about the outcome, you just do what you're doing, and that way you don't have all the extra stress of worrying about an outcome. And I think that's a really important strategy there. Were there any other kind of tips or solutions to the problems of being a mum that anyone has given you or the sports psychologist helped you with?
I think a big one was just throwing money at the problem. We make good money, so outsource. We had a cleaner. I did HelloFresh. The boys went to daycare or got a babysitter, and you just have to throw money at the problem until it goes away, because usually there's a financial solution to all of those things that make life boring, mundane, and take your time. And that time can be better served studying, unfortunately. I know washing sometimes seems more important and it's probably more exciting, but you just can't do it, and you need to pay other people to do those jobs for you. I think at the end of the day, if you're a bit poorer because of it, big deal. The exam costs $5,000. So if you take that into consideration and doing it again, it's cheaper to get HelloFresh.
Hey, that's interesting. If we think of these problems as a problem of time and flexibility, I completely agree, and a big fan of outsourcing anything that I don't need to do. And it's really good that you mentioned that. Can you list all the things you were able to outsource, just again as tangible things that people can think about, whether they're mums or not, to create more time for yourself?
So I think cooking is a big one that takes up a lot of time and mental load. So HelloFresh, Woolworths Online, Dinner Ladies, if people are in New South Wales, they're fantastic. Highly recommend. Their food's delicious. Definitely a cleaner.
Actually, just on the food thing, one of my mates, he got really into the keto diet type fad, and he got someone on Airtasker to make very prescriptive meals that were specifically keto for him, and it was very cheap. He was on Airtasker as well. So there's always a solution for whatever your dietary needs are. Someone will take your money to make it for you. Sorry, keep going.
Definitely a cleaner, and this went from fortnightly cleaner to weekly cleaner because it was just too hard. Washing, we tried to get someone to help with like washing and the folding of the washing, but unfortunately that was difficult where we lived. But that is something I would definitely recommend, because we had piles of washing that we just used to get our clothes out of. Daycare, so the boys were at full-time daycare, even though I worked a 4-day week and did lots of weekends, and the days that I wasn't at work, they still went because they were very precious days. And I also found our next door neighbor who was in high school, and she used to come over after school and mind the boys from like 4 till 6. So on preschool days where they finished early, I knew that she would look after them, and then she would feed them and bath them and that kind of thing. So I think in the city, there's probably some more options for help with washing and all that kind of thing. But that was what I found worked. But if I could have found more solutions, I would have.
And I'm imagining that your partner, Duncan, he sorted out the daily finances and, things like paying bills and, all those other kind of organizational things that take money, or even shopping for food. Is that safe to assume?
I probably still took on the food, but I would do Woolies online and pick it up. But he definitely took on the bill paying, probably all of the other things that I can't even think of because I haven't done them in such a long time. But he looks after, he works in finance, so I've delegated that to him as his life job anyway. But he would look after, and if there was a problem with the kids, he called in sick to work. So I'm very lucky that in our relationship, I would say he's the traditional female and I'm the male. And I know that sounds really sexist and isn't necessarily how society works anymore, but his role was a lot more flexible than mine, and it allowed him the capacity to call in sick even on a day that I had off, because he knew that wasn't a day off, that was a study day, and I was working on the weekend. So he might take the kids in the morning, and then he would work in the afternoon. So it was really our family's priority that I passed.
Yeah, a real team effort there. And when you tell me the story of you doing all these little things, like there's a really great story about the British cycling team, and just the fact that they never won a Tour de France or any kind of major competitions for decades. And this one coach came in and just, it was a story of incremental gains, just 1% improvements in multiple things, which is what you're kind of doing. You're just tackling all the little things that make up life and time and everything. And you're just slowly chipping it away to make it, you know, free yourself up from that time. So yeah, I think that's really exceptional, and probably something we could almost write a whole thing on, just to help people through and find a whole bunch of resources so that people actively go and tick these points off to create more time and flexibility.
So I wanted to ask, do you think that your hospital or even ANSCA could provide some solutions, or what do you think that would really help you, or would have helped you, in those 18 months? Was there anything else that we can sort of improve on as an organization, or even as a community, as a group of specialists?
That's a really good question. And I've been thinking about how we can make it easier, because I know that, I've just anecdotally speaking to people that it does take people with kids a little bit longer. And I mean, we're just as smart. We just have a few more things on our plate, and how we could make it easier. I think that something I found really comforting was Medical Mums Facebook group, just to know that I'm not particularly active on social media, but just knowing that there was lots of other people who had done what I was doing and I wasn't the first was a really comforting thought. I managed to, through one of the Viva courses, the South Australian primary course, I linked up with a fellow trainee in Western Australia, and we did some Viva practice, and we both had kids. And I think it was just really comforting to know that you're not alone, and there are other people like you. Was really comforting, and as well as that, having your allies. So I've already spoken about my husband, but one of my really good close friends is an anaesthetic trainee, and she would send me gifts of suits to pump me up and keep me on the right track. And I think it's just about, I don't know from an organizational perspective what we can do, but I think from a personal level, you need to have a variety of people who are on your team, and you need to find them and hold them really close. And I had and who would give me Vivas at PM when he'd finished. Like, he was happy to give me a Viva at any time of the day or night, no matter what time I'd finished work. And I think having those people who push you to pass and you to keep going when the chips are really down is really important. But from an organizational level, I don't know, I haven't really.
Well, you know what, maybe we can actually facilitate a specialist mums in anesthesia training group, because I think one of the things that I've sort of realized is that, you talk about that commonality of cause, and I think that's where a lot of people find their strength, to know that, someone like yourself has been through what they're going through right now. And I think a lot of mums out here are probably 6 months behind what you had gone through in August last year. And now they want to be able to sort of look forward and see you and see where you are at the moment. And that's where they want to see themselves. I think that would help. So, you know what? I think that we can, that's something that we can sort of work on and build upon. And, as Lars said, these are sort of incremental gains. And I think from, building on these connections, we can sort of create ideas that hopefully can just make things better for mums out there.
Hey, and Sarah, in the last few minutes, is there anything you would do differently? Anything you would change?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that too. I don't think so. I think that at the end of the day, I've come through this exam with an intact family, which is important and not something everyone who sits the exam can say. And I'm happy. So I don't think so. There's just one quote that which helped me a lot, is what Dame Quinton Bryce, who was the Governor General, and she said that women can have it all, but they can't have it all at the same time. And I found that when I was really struggling, was like, yes, Sarah, you can do it, but you just can't be everything to everyone right now. So yeah, we can do it, but you just need to be gentle and kind to yourself.
Yeah. I think that's I mean, there's so many good points there. I think as a preliminary discussion, and hopefully something that we'll somehow continue to work on in the background, and maybe just through all our different channels, that we can find some kind of way to improve the quality. And I think, Sarah, like you mentioned, you were really lucky in this as well, like having so many supports and a good team around you and everything. Like, not everyone has that. If we could somehow get a way to have a bit of a plan, a structure, because I love structures, and a way of just just equalizing this playing field for mums out there, I think that'd be a really, really good beneficial thing. Now we've come to the end of just, I guess, what Sarah is talking to us about, but does anyone have any questions or wants to add anything at all? Please write in the chat, or just unmute yourself.
I think we're all going to cry here.
You're allowed to cry. It's really hard.
As I said, it's incredibly emotional when you're dealing with, I guess, something that's a big part of not just your life, but your family's life as well. And that's where I think it just, it's very, very emotional, with just all that love and sacrifices involved with it. But yes,
again, it is absolutely okay to cry, because it's not like having a child is one aspect of your life. Real cycling fetish, and they're spending a lot of time doing that, but no one says, oh you're a cyclist, don't you want to do medicine? Or...
You guys are going to be the next leaders and the next drivers of the next change. And in order to actually drive that change, you have to be in that position right now where you're going to struggle through it. You're going to be able to have to encounter those challenges, those difficulties, those things that make it, as Sarah said, the Mount Everest challenge. You guys are going to have to climb that to the top and pass. And then from that position, you're going to be able to create opportunities, for others, and really, I guess, normalize what I think is happening. It's growing. I think we have to recognize that, mums in specialist training is becoming more and more. And we need, as an organization, to be able to facilitate that and to support that. So, it's you guys are the trailblazers, and Lara and I, we want to do everything that we can to get you guys through.
These are all things that we can, there's definitely a way around this, and definitely a way to make people see the light, because until people speak out and people advocate, then really change isn't going to happen. And it's just really important that we talk about this now, because you're really going to be trailblazing and advocating for all the hundreds and thousands of mums who are going to sit through this exam and go through what you guys have already been through in the future. So
I just want to thank Sarah. Thank you so much for coming on. It's, as I said, as you've succeeded, and I want you to continue on and remember this, because you are, we want you to be a champion for all the mums out there, and be a voice of change and a voice of continual evolution in terms of, I think, what we deliver as a specialty to look after those that are there. And thank you so much, Sarah. As I said, amazing achievement, and I'm completely in awe with what you've done.
Thank you for having me, and I'm happy to talk with any of you guys and pump you up and send you gifts, and because sometimes you need that, but we can all do it. You can do it. Like, I am just the same as you guys, so we can do it. You can get there.
Thanks so much for everyone being on this, especially for all of your experiences that you're sharing. So that we might conclude it there while we head off to the next session. Thanks very much for watching and listening, and really, really hope this is helpful for anyone out there going through what that you're all going through at this point. And we just really hope that this could be the start of a whole change in the process and a whole change in the curriculum and the way we sit the exam and the way we think about people in very specific situations that need special consideration, and just a different way of thinking about the exam and getting through it. So we'll close on that, and thanks very much, everyone, and we'll see you next time.